for our feature for today, linguistic intelligence, we welcome here actually a local who's actually a deputy principal of a high school, not in our area though, but more or less a neighborhood as well, neighboring suburb. And we welcome here actually Mr. Saurabh.
Bhattacharya.
That's right. I missed that one.
Good
Actually,
one. Well done.
Saurabh
Bhattacharya. Bhattacharya.
Bhattacharya, that's right. A deputy principal of high school. I've been trying actually to pronounce this quite a while.
Oh, the students call him Mr. B, so you can call me Mr. B if you
Mr. B. Oh, that's what you've been called by your high school students.
That's right,
That's good. A deputy principal at a high school in Sydney, and he has a postgraduate degree in English literature. So you're actually as well an English teacher. But before that, we welcome you here,
Thank you,
Sarah.
thank you, Jyoti. Thank you for making the time to bring me over here. It's fantastic.
For a bit of background, why we're actually able to source Sarah is here in generational Triple H. Triple H is actually a station located in the Wallaraba Arts and Cultural Center here in Hornsby. And we actually share this location, studio, with the Art Society of Hornsby. And mostly every week, if not every week, frequently there are some art pieces here that are being exhibited. And we are lucky to actually have an exhibition in here. And we met the wife, who's actually have some art pieces here in Wallaraba Center. And I was a bit, actually, I got interested in a photo of a portrait because I actually do as well into arts, and my forte is into portrait.
Right.
And I started when I was in year 4. I drew Moses, and at the same time, when I was in my tertiary year, I have a friend who's graduating. They have this grad picture, and I'm still in my junior year, and she gave me this grad picture for me to draw. It's very late, being asked, a size of an A2. It's kind of big.
Right, that's good.
So that was actually the last. And after that, you got married, you migrated in here. It's actually myself, I can really do Spider-Man. Oh, actually, it was not hard for me. Mom, it's actually really good. So I was got interested in the portrait that your wife has drawn about you with all the books. And I look at the books, they are philosophy books. And true enough, you're actually somewhere different areas. And I also interested in philosophy. So we welcome you, Saurabh, in here in Generation Hope.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jyoti.
And hopefully we could also feature the wife, Anupama, to actually to share her journey as an artist.
Yeah, I think that's coming up in a few weeks, isn't it?
That's right. Because here in Generation Hope, we actually feature the 8 domains of intelligence by Howard Gardner. It's not just singing, dancing, spatial includes linguistic skills, logical mathematics, intra and interpersonal skills, and also naturalist intelligence, that is being able to commune with nature. And we're very lucky here in the Hornsby Karika area. We got the valley, we've got the river, not just the suburban and CBD area of the suburb. So you actually finished a postgraduate degree in English literature with a bachelor in teaching degree and honors in philosophy. Wow, it's a very wide scope of education. It's not really confined in classroom, isn't it?
No, I think one of the key philosophies that I've had in my life is to be a perpetual learner, because I think it's important to keep yourself open. Like even now, I still dabble, and I've applied to do a Masters of Education. Let's see if that comes through. So it's good to learn. It makes life a bit more interesting, and you keep the brain cells active as you grow older. It's really important.
That's right. In this digital age, not many people are really into reading. But for me as well, like you, I like to flip the pages of the book and really smell it, and you really have a tactile sensation. Not just using one finger, the index finger, to flick the phone or the cursor of the computer, of the mouse. So it's very good to have that tactile sensation, isn't it?
I generally put a goal every year of the number of books that I would like to read in a year. So this year my goal is about 38 odd books.
Wow.
And but I'm a bit of a fan of sort of a hybridized technology. So I do have a Kindle, and I read in the Kindle.
Are you an author yourself, or would you like to be an author yourself one day?
A frustrated author would be a better response.
Oh,
I do occasionally dabble in writing the occasional short story. I used to be a journalist in a past life, so
That's
I
right.
used to be a journalist. But I have some ideas for a novel, but I currently don't have the discipline to sit down and write every day. To be an author, you've got to write every day.
Yes.
In terms of reading, I have the Kindle, but then I also listen to audiobooks and I also read physical books. So at any given point of time, I'm reading about 2 or 3 books at the same time.
That's right. You started your career as a journalist in India.
That's
right. And you moved to Sydney in 2003
Yes.
and held multiple roles in salesmanship,
That's
in sales,
Yeah.
before moving to teaching.
Yeah.
And you have a passion of reading. Well, it's a very, very interesting journey, isn't it?
Bit of a motley collection of experiences of the time.
That's right. And in India, have you been very fascinated with the English language?
Yes, so my fascination with the English language started when I was in year 3 or 4. I studied in English medium schools over there, so the primary mode of education was English, but unlike most of my peers who were largely in maths and science, I couldn't understand too much of maths. I was more inclined towards reading and watching and listening, so my focus was more on the words rather than on figures.
That's right.
And then I remember when I was in year 3, my first book was To Kill a Mockingbird. When I read that, I was 6.
Wow, that's a very thick book, isn't it, for that age?
And I remember because in the book, Scout actually refers to her father by his first name, Atticus. And so I went and called my father by his first name, and that didn't go down well, I can tell you that. He didn't like that fact. But that's the thing that I have been, that was probably the first, one could say, the adult book that I read was To Kill a Mockingbird. And then in year 3 and 4, I read a lot. So I actually used to borrow Treasure Island of Robert Louis Stevenson from the library. I bought it so many times the librarian gifted it to me. He said, just get away, go out, don't bother me anymore. As time passed, I got into, I did an arts degree in I specialized in arts courses in year 11 and 12. And then I went into doing an English honors in Calcutta. And reading has been like a passion for me.
That's wonderful. We would going to learn more about you and your fascination and interest in reading and learning after this community events and announcements with Saurabh Bhattacharya. Did I get it right?
Well done.
Thank you so much. I've been practicing it last night when I was sending messages to your wife, Bhattacharya, because but usually BH all the time, isn't it? All right. So at a very young age, you've been influenced. Is there anyone in your family who's actually have interests like yours?
Yeah, both my parents they're basically English people. So my dad passed away a few years ago. So they both were very much into reading. So I've always been around books, and unlike today's generation, which has so many other things to look at, so you've got television and you've got internet
and Dr. Google,
Dr. Google and stuff. We didn't have such luxuries. So our way out of boredom was to read, and that's what we did. Or either go out to play or just read. And I'm not a particularly sporty sort, so I went for reading.
That's right. And actually, when you read a book, it's actually your friend. It's just like an adventure, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think reading provides the ability, and this is something that our young people should keep in mind. Reading provides the ability to have an experience of emotions that in a safe environment, and it gives the ability to enhance one's emotional intelligence, because you're sort of living another person's life through books, and in the process you gain a deeper understanding of the complexities of life, hopefully without not experiencing all the downs, but definitely experiencing all the ups. What I have realized over time is the empathetic skills that one builds as one goes deeper into reading can then be projected into a daily life. And one of the things that I keep telling my students is that don't see a book as a text, see it as a window walking novels waiting to be read.
That's a wonderful insight I've heard for the week. It's amazing. And actually, for all the listeners out there, we're actually had a discussion to have book review or book review of the week. And we are so grateful to have, of course, Saurabh volunteering to be a contributor. Hopefully, he has to be a co-presenter here in Generational. We have Miss Cora Kwasai who's been here. Her specialization is into giftedness. She was here a few weeks, which we're so pleased. And she explained giftedness. And she had a few personal family matters to deal with. And at the same time, she got a business to launch. So she's been pretty preoccupied, apart from, of course, being a mentor to some of the teachers in her school, because she's also an assistant principal.
Right.
And used to be an opportunity class teacher. So hopefully we could get her, even if she's not able to come in here, she could always have contributions via pre-recorded to get her insights as a teacher, especially transitioning from a primary to a high school.
Yeah, that's a difficult transition time.
It is actually. I have a preteen, and many people, oh, that's hard. Yeah. How about girls? How about boys? They're different, when they get older, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I've had the occasion to teach in co-educational schools. Currently, I'm in a girls' high school. The way boys and girls approach learning are qualitatively different. However, I would say in terms of the transition from primary to high school, the primary concern is that you're moving away from an environment where you see the same teacher day in, day out, to an environment where you've got to go to different classrooms to face different teachers. And again, I personally feel that the more you expand your knowledge through the process of engagement in literature, the ability to engage with these diverse experiences increases, and the ability to be able to adapt and pivot according to the requirements of the different teachers and the different subject areas. In year 7 onwards, that's the biggest challenge. And then by the time you're in year 8 or year 9, whether you're a boy or a girl, you've created a niche, you've created a friend group, and then the point is to kind of expand your scope as a learner.
Oh, that's very interesting. I grew up in older school as well, and for 8 years. So it's pretty long. So we're still getting in touch. We have a group of alumni, and we're now mothers. We're now turning 50. So for us, I'm turning 48. But actually, I was young. I should not be in their batch. I should be a bit younger. So some of them are 50 already, 49. I'm still turning 48. So as you can see, it's another. That's why Generation Hope is pretty like a mirror to me. I grew up in here on my own. When I was 24, I'm still a youth at a young age. So I'm very grateful for Triple H for giving this opportunity to be able to have this, and at the same time bringing along who are in the same mindset of giving importance to nurturing young minds. As we were all nurtured, like you when you were younger,
That's
isn't
right.
it?
Yeah.
And we are here for other children to follow our footsteps. Not just our family, our children, but those out there who may not have a good model to look up to. So we're all here to bring out the best in all of us.
Absolutely.
Yes. So with your engagement, have you get involved into reading clubs out there when you were growing?
We didn't have any experience of reading clubs in India. People generally, but we did have a lot of book exchange happening. So amongst our friend groups, we would read something and then we'll exchange books. That's something I unfortunately miss here because I've started to build it in our school. So I go and talk to the fellow teachers and I'm like, I've read this book. Come on, you gotta read this. And then you say, okay, I'll give you this and you give me this. Book exchanging was a dynamic process that happened, and we were always very careful of somebody else's book because they were expensive at that time.
But I think before it's comics.
Yes, I had the whole set of Tintins.
And there's some children business out there. Oh, Mama, we know comics. See?
I had the whole set of, I don't know if you know Adventures of Tintin.
Yes.
Yeah, I had the whole set and then I went to a hostel and I gave it to somebody who never gave it back to me. So much later in life, my wife, she presented me with the whole set again for one of my birthdays.
Wow.
And it's fantastic. I'm going back to childhood again.
Our was Nancy Drew.
Oh, love Nancy
Drew.
Yeah, and Hardy Boys.
And Hardy Boys.
And they were written by the same person.
I know, it's just for
So
girls and
cool,
boys.
yeah.
I wonder one day we can meet each other.
They started bringing out books that had an adventure that had Hardy Boys met Nancy Drew and you had to guess the ending.
I did get into that book.
That was fantastic. Yeah.
That's so good. Like what you've said, it's We are all novel. We are all waiting to be read. And actually, every day we make our own story, isn't it?
So true. I mean, the whole point of you were talking about linguistic intelligence, and one of the key components of linguistic intelligence is to be able to not just articulate your own thoughts, but to be able to understand the articulation of other people's thoughts. And that's the core of proper communication.
That's right. Communication is very common word, but actually many people are not able to communicate effectively, isn't it? It's not just verbally, but written as well. When they get into high school, oh god, another term paper sheet of narrative. What am I gonna do? So they are not able to organize their thoughts how they're going. But actually, there's already guide questions, isn't it?
Yes. I think one of the things that I've been noticing over the years as a teacher in communication is that because a lot of students are not engaging in wide reading, the vocabulary is getting impacted, and as a result, we do not have enough words to articulate our thoughts. Therefore, the communication really tends to rely more on the unsaid and the ums and the ahs, or the like, and then dot dot dot.
That's right.
And it's reliant more on a facial recognition and to look at the tics of the body, because communication is a package. So if you're doing face to face, you are looking at the way the hands are moving and the way the face is moving. The new generation is fantastic in picking up those tics and the way a human being's hand moves, and understand a lot more in non-verbal communication. However, because they do not have the repertoire of reading, the vocabulary is getting impacted, and as a result, verbal communication is getting impacted.
That's right. Actually, that's one of the key messages of one of our guest speaker here. She's actually a local teacher, now in high school, but she also taught in primary. And when it was actually during lockdown, so she were not able to have her as a guest, and she have a pre-recorded interview on transitioning from primary to high school. And one of the key messages she mentioned was let them read, and actually so they could add their vocabulary. And that's really correct.
Yeah.
But if you're into internet watching video, how can you do that?
Yeah, so the thing is that unfortunately a lot of our consumption currently of information is passive. So we are sitting and we are getting fed information, whether we are watching Netflix or whether we are going on a website. There is a benefit of having passive information gathering, because it sort of releases the brain from focusing on the information gathering and doing other stuff. So as you can see, you're watching Netflix, you're always on your phone, you're multitasking, you're trying to text people and stuff. But unfortunately, the flip side of that is that passive information gathering results in an environment where the brain refuses to remain active. And as a result, when you give them a book, it becomes tired, because they're not used to reading consistently for that long. Whereas reading is active information gathering, because you have to imagine those constructs. You're not being fed the landscape, you're given a description of the landscape. You have to put it within the context of your own culture, your own worldview, and then make sense of this as you're creating a film in your head instead of being fed a film.
That's right.
And that makes a huge difference in the way you engage with those ideas. And I think that's the key point in being a good reader and a writer, is the ability to communicate in a way where you are actively engaging in the communication process.
It's very interesting. We're going to go back to you again, to actually what message can you impart to guardians, carers out there, and parents, most important, to be able to nurture this type of intelligence. We just don't rely on the children, okay, do this, and then when we're busy, how can we be there? But for now, let's listen once again to community events and our guests in here. Yes, and we are so pleased Saurabh is actually able to say yes to be a contributor and a presenter here in Generational, and bring some high school students and teen here to be able to explore the wonderful world of radio broadcasting, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we're really grateful to have here in our home speaker in Gaishan to have a studio like this. Not all Sabbath actually have a radio studio. So we go back to what we're talking about, and that is actually your messages to parents out there, carers and guardians, and how to nurture that linguistic intelligence in children. And one of them is actually letting them read, isn't it?
That's absolutely. We often get this question from parents like, my daughter's not reading. What do I do? And like, what is she reading? Oh no, she's picking up some. She reads some of the manga, or she reads a comic book, and she's still reading. That's the important bit. Expand the scope. Don't ask. And then my advice to parents would be, just get them to pick up a book, any book. Let them read it, and if it's possible they may not understand everything. That's where you come in. And it's not just a question of seeing reading as a chore. It's seeing reading as yet another form of entertainment. I unfortunately often see that I go to restaurants and then I see husband, wife, little kids. They come in and they put a screen in front of the child, and the child is just playing a game. I personally like gaming. I do muck around with gaming every once in a while. But where is the incentive for this kid to engage in an active form of imagination?
That's right.
And if instead of giving an iPad, just give them a book.
Yeah. Or for instance, digital age. We cannot change the fact that we are advancing
True.
technology. We have to be open-minded out there.
Yeah.
But again, there should be a limit, isn't it?
Yeah, and screen time is something that you have to work with the kids. Again, they are far more intuitive learners in many ways. In various ways, they are way ahead of us. The way they engage with visuals is fantastic. There are things that they pick up that I can't think of. But then our generation's job is to add to that, not to take away. What they're doing is fantastic. But then what they are missing out on is the ability of world building, creating castles in the air using imagination.
Imagination is very powerful.
That's
isn't
right.
it?
And the more imaginative a child is, the better they would be, even in terms of a work environment. Because one of the key skills of problem solving is to be able to think imaginatively for solutions. And if I don't have the capacity to think imaginatively now, how can I be better in any kind of career that I choose? And reading is the best way to think imaginatively.
That's right. And actually, you mentioned when you're reading, it's a novel that you are exploring, but at the same time, ask yourself, put yourself into the shoes of the author yourself. How can she do this one?
That's
So
right.
there's actually a relation with the author.
Absolutely. One of the things that we do in terms of when we teach novels in high schools is this concept of meaning making. Somebody has written something hundreds of years ago or 50 years ago. They have not written it for our audience. They've written it for their own audience at that time. But I'm reading it, I'm picking this book up and I'm reading it right now. And it's in that beautiful, I would say, tango of ideas between the one who wrote and the one who reads that meaning is truly made. When I'm reading something, I'm bringing in my context, my lens, which was not there when the person wrote it. But it's because there are components that are universally same. They become the foundation, and on that foundation we build meaning. Meaning is not something that is given. Meaning is something that is developed. It's a dynamic process. It's an organic process, and the way to make it happen is to engage in continual reading.
That is absolutely correct. And what's your message for out there for children, for the youth? Of course, you encourage you to read. So, what type of reading would that be? And then, it's always with bits and pieces of this, bits and pieces of that. And for instance, and also, there are some books like Harry Potter, for instance.
Yeah.
There's a book, and compare it. Be a critical thinker.
Yeah.
Compare it with a filmmaker.
Yeah.
Was it really? Did it match with what the author has mentioned? So otherwise, in the near future, if they're be like that, if they're into critical thinking and to reading and with a wide scope of vocabulary, one day they're going to be a quality author as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head. The whole point of, I think my message to the generation that's following us, the younger ones, is that engage in any sort of thing, but engage with it in a critical lens. Don't put something on Google and click on the first link. Go deeper. Understand where they're coming from. Use your own decision and your judgment, because critical thinking is the foundation of being a successful person and being an empathetic person. Take everything, engage with it, understand it. I will be the last person to say, don't read this, don't read that. Read whatever you want, watch whatever you want if you want to. But engage with it critically. Approach it in such a way that you are constantly questioning the whys and the hows. And the more the questioning happens, the better you become as a reader. You engage, and the better you become as a learner. It's not the question that if a teacher is telling you X, Y, Z is happening, don't take it as the gospel. Explore it. Why? How? Ask the question. Teachers love it. What we don't like is when somebody just sits there and nods their head, because that's passive learning. Engage in a dialogue, understand the question it further, maybe push back. That's fantastic. And I laud the younger generation because they are generally quite critical in the way they approach things, but they also need to temper their critical nature with actually doing some research in the background. So it's a question of being knowledgeable and critical at the same time.
Absolutely. Coming from research as well, because actually I work in research. So we may not be reading proper books that we can hold with tactile sensation, but before we actually submit our assignment, we have to do a lot of academic journals.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
like what we said, don't just not to Google, Wikipedia or anything. Explore many other resources. So really research-based evidence and real quality resources.
Absolutely. And this was probably, I think it was Socrates who had said the man who knows he knows nothing is wise.
I missed that one, sorry?
So Socrates,
Yes, it's
the
Plato's
god of
Socrates.
Greek
I miss
philosophy.
that. Oh, I love them actually.
The man
Philosophy.
who knows he knows nothing is wise.
That's right. Because you actually, it's like, empty yourself. How can you be filled if you're full already, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Too much.
Yeah. Expand the scope. Always be open to learning. Open to learning in a critical manner, not in a way that you're sort of following somebody. Question them, and if you like what they say, take it on board, adapt it, make it yours. But don't close yourself down. Don't say that because Mr. Google said so or because my teacher said so. That's not the way to learn. The way to learn is to, yeah, they said so, but then I did my research, and then now I've come up with what I have learned. And then even that learning is open. So the Hegel had this whole theory of thesis. So his whole point was, you have an idea, that's your thesis. But for every idea, there is a counter, and that's the antithesis. And you need to engage with both to synthesize your knowledge. And the synthesis eventually becomes another thesis till you truly learn.
Exactly. That's in mathematics we also learn the synergy, the power of synergy. 1 + 1 is 3.
Yes.
So
You have to work
and I said it to my
towards
son, Mom, it's 2. Oh, I'll tell you. Yes, of course, it's 2, but I'm just telling you. And then you get this idea, make your own.
That's right.
That's right.
And I think that's probably the foundation of all knowledge, is the willingness and the ability to keep the mind open and engage in a critical manner, not absorb everything and follow it blindly, not absorb and say I know everything, but to have a balance between the two.
That's right. Being a migrant, we have our own culture, we have our do's and don'ts. But coming here to Australia, we need to be open-minded, learn to assimilate, isn't it? And then we make our own culture ourselves.
And as migrants, we come up with a massive advantage because we are coming with a cultural knowledge base that is itself so rich. So why should I say no to that cultural knowledge base? Why not take bits from there? Like I, for example, I can speak and read Hindi and Bengali, apart from English. And I make it a point.
You can be polyglot.
Yeah, well, one tries.
For those out there, it's actually people who can speak 6 or more languages.
Well, not 6, I think it's 3.
Multilingual.
But I make it a point to read a Bengali book or read a Hindi book while I'm reading an English book as well, because there's so much learning in so many other languages, and if I have the cultural facility of tapping into yet another language, why should I say no to that?
That is right. So for those out there with linguistic intelligence, so famous people who have linguistic intelligence include, of course, William Shakespeare, able to express that in words, in poems.
And Shakespeare created words. He created words. They didn't exist before Shakespeare used them. Something like bedroom was created by Shakespeare.
Right.
Assassin was created by Shakespeare. So, and those are neologisms, and we are constantly creating neologisms. We make the word Google a verb now. That
Yes.
didn't exist as a verb. It was a mathematical term, wasn't it? Google was just a mathematical number.
Did you know that one?
Yeah. So now we've made it a verb, and eventually everybody will use it as a verb.
And of course, one of them, if you're into Hollywood, Natalie Portman is actually one of those who are considered polyglot. The reason is she can really speak many languages.
And she's super smart.
I know, and so it's amazing. It's not just acting. You know, your profession doesn't end there.
It's a person.
We have so much insights we gather from you, and we are going to be very much pleased to hear more about you. And I hope our listeners out there are able to grasp understanding on why is it important to actually nurture the linguistic intelligence of our youth of today. It really starts from home, isn't it? It
Yes,
starts from
absolutely.
parents, carers, and guardians. So that's it for this week.